today we have decided to discuss some of the important issues, because often we get confused as to what is the which is the portion, which is the part of the judgment that is cited is called ratioination, or how to ratioinate the binding force of the precedent. It is not that each and everything said in the judgment is binding. It is not that every judgment is binding. So there are certain principles, certain concepts which we need to understand before we cite a judgment with appropriateness, or which will result into 100% success. So before that, let me begin with saying that the concept of precedent is in fact not new to our country. In our culture, it has been said that that path is good path which has been walked over by our ancestors. That means the path shown to us by our ancestors is considered to be the good path. So this kind of cultural understanding or the concept available into our Indian society is nothing but today what we call precedent. Now in our Indian constitution, we find a specific article 141. Now that article simply declares that the law declared by Supreme Court of India shall be the law binding upon all authorities, all courts into India. Now this has to be understood with the concept of equality, that is article 14. The precedent also helps us to achieve the equality in legal parlance, because equality mandates, the clause of equality mandates, article 14 mandates that all persons similarly situated, similarly placed should be given similar treatment. And that is possible when we follow the concept of precedent in the court in deciding the cases. Now, when we talk of law declared by Supreme Court of India binding on all, similarly, as far as the subordinate courts in the particular states are concerned, for them also, the law declared by the respective high court also is having the same kind of binding force in respect of the subordinate courts in the particular state. For example, in the state of Maharashtra, all subordinate courts, that is district court, sessions court, magisterial courts, they are all bound by the law declared by the Bombay High Court. Now, before we go to the very concept of ratio decidendi, let me discuss some hierarchical system in our Indian system. As far as the criminal jurisprudence is concerned, the criminal hierarchical system is concerned, we find that at the lowest rank, at the lowest level, is the court of magistrate, judicial magistrate second class. Now, CRPC talks of magistrate of second class. Thereafter comes the judicial magistrate of first class. And then thereafter comes the court of chief judicial magistrate. As far as the metropolitan cities are concerned, like Bombay, instead of JMFC, that is judicial magistrate first class, we have metropolitan magistrate. Both of them have similar power with regard to imposition of the penalty and the trial. As far as CJM is concerned, compared to that, in Mumbai, we have metropolitan magistrate. Thereafter comes the assistant sessions judge or the court. Then comes additional or joint sessions court, and then sessions judge. This is civil as far as subordinate judiciary is concerned, and then comes the high court, and then of course comes Supreme Court. So this is the criminal hierarchy in our criminal system. In civil, we do have small cause court, which is at the lowest rank. Then comes civil judge, junior division, then senior division, then district judge, and then high court and Supreme Court. So this is the hierarchy. Now, Now, when we talk of this hierarchical system, often we get confused because as far as subordinate courts are concerned, we find that there is a court decided only by one singular person, that is one judge. But when it comes to High Court and Supreme Court, we find that judgments are delivered by the division benches. Division bench may sometimes consist of only 2 persons sitting, sometimes 3 persons sitting, sometimes even 4 judges sitting, and sometimes even 5 judges sitting. Now, technically, the terminology that we use sometimes is different. But a bench which is consisting of more than one person is, called division. And we have also constitutional bench in Supreme Court. Now, again, in constitutional bench also, the minimum number of the judges is required is 5, but constitution benches have comprised of even 13 judges in Supreme Court while deciding landmark cases. So therefore, why this is important to understand is that the number of judges also has a bearing upon the precedential value of the judgment that we cite. Therefore, we need to understand that the judgment given by the bench of larger number of judges is having more precedential value. It is more binding when a judgment on the same issue, same principle of law is rendered by the lesser number of judges, and that is contrary to the judgment of the larger bench. Then, of course, it happens. We come across many a times in the court that there are different 2 citations on the same issue. One is rendered by the 2 judge bench, and another is of more judges. There is 3 or 4 or something. In that case, which is the judgment that needs to be followed? Of course, law says it has to be judgment of the greater number of judges. Same thing happens in respect of High Court, where a single judge judgment may appear to be contrary to a view taken by the division bench. Now, this has to be understood in the context of the ratio decidendi, and prior to that, let me explain the concept of obiter dicta, because these two are so interlinked and interconnected that often we make a mistake of understanding or taking a obiter dicta as ratio, or sometimes we take ratio itself as obiter dicta. Now, if you go into the plain meaning of obiter dicta, then what constitutes this obiter dicta is the things or the matters said by the judges by the way. In short, whatever is not necessarily required for the judges to decide the case, but still they comment upon certain issues. These matters or these observations which are not required, because in the absence of such observations also, the issue that was before the court could have been well decided. But even then, courts sometimes go on making comments or observations with regard to other aspects also. So these other aspects become a kind of obiter dicta. And these obiter dictas have persuasive value, though it may not have the precedential value or binding force like ratio decidendi. Now, it is often said that the task of understanding what is ratio is very difficult. Many legal experts, many jurists have attempted to do. Even jurists like Professor Goodhart. If you study the legal theories and all that, you will come across such names. Professor Goodhart also tried his level best, but even it is said that he also fails to give infallible method of understanding what is ratio. However, there is a other side of this difficulty also, because this difficulty often gives you an opportunity to mold the law according to your desire. It also gives an opportunity to the judges to mold the law according to the requirement of the particular case. So this difficulty, it has another angle also. So now to the main issue, the main concept, the issue. Now it is said that every case has some factual position. Okay, without factual position, disputed factual position, nobody comes to court. So judgment is consisting of 4 different aspects. The first is the facts of the case. Then comes the arguments advanced by the parties respective. In a civil case, the facts which are brought to the court by a plaintiff in a civil suit, and the facts which are brought to the court by a WS, by the defendant. These are the facts. Out of these facts, the court will determine or court will frame some issues. And these issues are issues which arise out of the facts, then arguments, and then comes the important aspect, that is the decision supported by the reasons. Okay, so a judgment delivered by the court is necessarily containing the reasons in support of the decision, and reasons are stated to be the heartbeat of the judgment. Therefore, it is quite easy when we get a reasoned judgment to understand what is the ratio. So ratio is to be understood from these things. First, what are the facts, what were the questions, and in what manner the questions were decided, and what is the reasoning behind such questions. Now, to explain this position, I would like to give one example of a case to understand it very better as to how we can get a precedent ratio. In Supreme Court in the year 1998, there came a case. The case is Muhammad Hadi Raja versus State of Bihar. This case you can find in the Google by putting Muhammad Hadi Raja versus State of Bihar. There, a person who was serving in a public undertaking, a corporation, he was prosecuted for some offense, and he raised an issue that he being a public servant, because going by the definition of public servant in IPC, a person serving into any government company or any government corporation, by whatever name it is called, but it is ultimately controlled by the government, that we call normally, instrumentality of the state, also becomes a public servant. And when we talk of public servant, then CRPC comes into play, section 197. And according to section 197, a sanction is must before we prosecute a public servant. So Muhammad Hadi Raja raised an issue that his prosecution without the sanction mandated by section 197 of CRPC is illegal. Therefore, the case should be quashed. Now, this issue, whether a public servant serving into any such corporation or a government company or instrumentality of the state, not a department of the state itself, is entitled to have the protective umbrella of the sanction under section 197 of CRPC. Now, this was the first time that issue came before the court. Supreme Court, having analyzed the legal position and interpreting the provisions of CRPC 197 of CRPC, held that the public servants which are serving into the government offices or the government departments are only entitled to the protective umbrella of the sanction, and not the persons who are serving into the corporations or the public undertakings. And therefore, this issue was decided in this way. Now, what is the ratio? You will not find a case prior to this. Prior to 1998, you will not find a case where such issue was taken or when the issue was decided. Now, this is the first time that court had decided that a person serving into public undertaking controlled by the government is not entitled to the protective umbrella of section 197 of CRPC. Now, this judgment has a binding precedent. It is having a binding force in all other cases. Hello? Hello? हेलो विनोद, आवाज नहीं आ रहा मेरा?
आ रहा है, आवाज आ रहा है, आवाज आ रहा है।
अच्छा, ही गमरेश जी, आपका नेटवर्क शायद कुछ डिफिकल्टी होगा।
हाँ, स्टार्टिंग में मेरा भी वही था कैसे।
हाँ हाँ हाँ। अच्छा, अदर पार्टिसिपेंट्स को कुछ दिक्कतें आ रही, आवाज आ रहा है क्लियर?
मैसेज टेक्स्ट।
नो प्रॉब्लम।
ओके। अच्छा, बाय द वे, अभी अपना ये जो समय है मीटिंग का, वो अभी शायद ये 2 या 3 मिनट में ऑटोमेटिकली ये हो जाएगा। तो हमको यही आईडी से फिर से लॉगिन करना पड़ेगा, बिकॉज इट इज बीइंग डन ऑन द फ्री वर्जन ऑफ द जूम. So please once again visit the same link to join if this gets to an end. Okay. So now I was telling about the case of Muhammad Hadi Raja. Now this is the case in which for the first time court has laid down a principle that though a person serving into public undertaking may be a government servant, public servant, going by the definition of IPC, but still the mandate of sanction, that is section 197, is not available to him. He is not entitled to get the protective cover of the umbrella sanction. Now, persons similarly placed should be given similar or equal treatment is the mandate of Article 14. And therefore, Article 141 says that the law declared by Supreme Court is having the binding force across the country. Now, in all other future cases, this judgment is to be applied with the same force where any person who is serving into the public undertaking or say any other instrumentality of the state, for example, now in Mumbai, we do have Mumbai Corporation, municipal corporation. So municipal corporation is not the department of the state government. It has its own legal entity. It has own its statutory entity. So going by the judgment of Muhammad Hadi Raja, the people who are serving into the Mumbai Mahanagarpalika are not entitled to claim that they are, they could not be prosecuted for want of the sanction. Now, this judgment is followed by Supreme Court or High Court in different matters in the next course of time. But what constitutes a precedent, what becomes a precedent, is that of Hadi Raja only. Subsequent cases which follow the Hadi Raja may be in continuation, but the case of Muhammad Hadi Raja is the first case in which this principle was laid down. Therefore, the concept of ratio has to be gathered from the first case wherein court has evolved some new principle. It has laid down some new principle of law. Otherwise, a case where facts are brought to the court and both parties have argued their matter and court has applied the existing law and decided the case and has not evolved any kind of new principle, then such cases are actually not having any kind of binding precedent, because these are the cases which are decided into between the parties. But often we say, because of the lack of understanding nowadays and the growth of this technology, each and every judgment of court is getting reported, even if the judgment is not laying down or evolving any new principle of law. The cases which are decided on the general application of law without putting or without creating a new principle of law are also being cited in the courts because they are reported, and we believe that every reported case is a precedent. But in legal actual theory, the precedent is the only precedent where court has evolved some new principle of law. Now, this time has come to an end. In the next continuation, I will give another 2-3 cases with this concept on this very issue, so we can understand it better. The time is over, or
remaining 2 minutes.
2 minutes, no? Okay. So to recap once again, the ratio is a part of that judgment which is decided by the court on application of the law, but while doing so, court has evolved or created some new principle of law. Now this has to be deduced from the judgment. Now sometimes what happens, judges go on making comments. Now in a case which went to Supreme Court from the state of Maharashtra, that is the case of Kailas versus state of Maharashtra. Now that was the case where a lady belonging to Hill community was naked paraded because she was having an affair with the boy belonging to higher caste in that particular village. And because of that, the engagement of that boy was broken. And the family members of that boy got enraged, and in the anger, they started beating that lady and they stripped her naked and they paraded her. So this heinous kind of crime took place in this took place in the state of Maharashtra in Ahmednagar district. Now Sessions Court convicted all of them. Appeal was prepared in the High Court. High Court acquitted some of the accused on hyper-technical ground that the caste certificate of that lady, that she belongs to the Bhille community, was not produced. And then the conviction under the Atrocity Act was set aside. However, the conviction under the IPC offences was upheld. Against this also, the accused appealed in the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court decided this case. I think this case was decided in the year 2011. Now, interestingly, see, this is the example I am giving to how judges go on making observations which may not be really required to decide the case. So Supreme Court, while deciding his case, it has if you read the judgment, it is available in the Google also. You can simply type Kailas versus state of Maharashtra. Supreme Court in initial few paras only says that this is very serious matter, and it has even criticized the High Court for taking hyper technical view, and it has confirmed the convictions of all the accused. Then this judgment of Kailas versus state of Maharashtra, just we were talking about, Supreme Court not only upheld the convictions of all the accused, but Supreme Court went on to making comment as to how the people belonging to scheduled tribes in India are subjected to such kind of inhuman treatment. And Supreme Court gave references of examples from epic like Mahabharata, wherein also a person belonging to this community, that is Eklavya, was subjected to such kind of heinous treatment, and he was forced by the Dronacharya to give his thumb as a Guru Dakshina, when in fact Dronacharya had refused to teach archery to the Eklavya. This example was quoted by Supreme Court in the judgment in support of its conclusion that the people who belong to this community are being treated with this unequal, inhuman kind of treatment. Court went on to make a reference to, the China, because in China you will find almost all persons will have the same ancestry. They are belonging to some Han Vanchad, and they speak the same language of Mandarin. Supreme Court gave this example to make a point that in country like India, where we do not have the same language at every particular distance, we do not have the same ancestry, because our appearance, our gait, our language is diverse. So in a country which is full of diversity, what is the only thing that can keep everybody united is only the secularism. So Supreme Court narrated the importance, significance of the secularism also in that judgment. And ultimately Supreme Court, made reference to the historical facts to show that the India is a country like America. That is, India is a country of migrants. The people came to India in search of the food or fertile land for the food. So I'm making this reference to this judgment because these observations of Supreme Court in that Kailas versus State of Maharashtra were actually not required to decide the issue before the court as to whether the conviction of the accused was legal or illegal. But court made all these observations, and these observations of any judgment are nothing but obiter dicta. They are not the reasons in support of the judgment, reasons in support of the issue that is decided by the court either way. These are the things observed or said by the court by the way, when they were not called upon to make observations. So these kind of obiter dicta are to be understood so that one can understand betterly what is ratio. So in order to understand what is the ratio, one must also understand what is the obiter dicta. Then and then only of a given judgment, of a given precedent, either cited by us or by the other side, we can successfully gather the ratio and make use of it in support of our case. Often it is said that the words used in a judgment are not the words of statute. They are used by the court in deciding the cases. Therefore, a word of statute is to be not compared to the word of the judgment. Every case depends upon the factual position before it. Every case is decided with the application of the principle, application of the factual position. Therefore, courts often say that the slightest change into factual position will make a lot of difference. Therefore, the ratio will also get changed, and in such cases where it is difficult for the court to understand or for the advocate to understand as to what is the ratio, what are the cases where it is difficult, it becomes difficult. Sometimes what happens, a judgment is given by the bench, but the judges on the bench are more. For example, 3 judges, and each of them gives a judgment. Interestingly, the judgment or the final order is the same, but the reasons which they give in support of their individual separate judgments are different, or sometimes they even appear to be contrary to each of them. So in such cases, it is quite difficult to understand as to what is the ratio, because every judge, say for example, a larger bench of 3 judges has given a judgment and each of them has written a separate judgment, and the reasons are different. It is not easy for us to understand the ratio because every judge is giving different reasons. Now, there are cases where the actual reasons are not given in support of the issue that is decided. So in such case also, when the judgment itself is unreasoned, it is difficult to get the ratio, and therefore we say that the reasons are the heartbeat of the judgment. There are cases where judges decide the cases in ignorance of the statutory provisions. Now, if the statutory provision itself is ignored, then again it becomes worse, and therefore such judgments are to be actually ignored. And even the smallest court, even the taluka court, like civil judge junior division or magistrate of first class, is also empowered to say that the judgment is in ignorance of the existing statutory provision, therefore it is not binding. Now, these are the small concepts which I could relate to or narrate today. Now, as I told, this difficulty is also having another positive aspect, because we can distinguish if it is not easy to understand the ratio. Sometimes our opponent cites a judgment of Supreme Court, and it is difficult to get the ratio. Then it is also a matter of your opportunity, because you can mold it, you can have your own interpretation. You can convince with your convincing ability to the court. And similarly, judges do often to such kind of thing of distinguishing the judgments on the interpretation of the law or the factual position. So, dear friends, now I must stop here. And if anyone wants to raise any query or question, please.
Hello. It is a nice lecture, nicely explained. First time I came to know that it is difficult for judges also
Yes, yes,
to decide and understand the ratio.
yes, yes.
I was not knowing this.
Actually, many jurists also fail to give the specific method of understanding what is the ratio. And that is the reason that judgments are keep on reverse in the next course of action, course of time.
Yeah.
They are often reversed by the higher court. They are even overruled by the
Please
same
let
court
me know.
sometimes.
Yeah. Good, because day to day we come across with such judgments and ratio, and sometimes from the bench judges ask what is the ratio.
Yes, yes,
Then person is armless.
Yes.
Without arm.
yeah,
So with this lectures,
Yes.
of course it is recorded and it must be on YouTube. One can go and revise it, and we can equip. We can say
Yes.
that we are equipped to answer the query of the judges and opponents.
yeah.
That is its advantages.
Yes. In fact, this simple formula that we today discuss is we must understand actually what are the facts and what is the question that came out of the facts. And court has decided that question either way, and in deciding that question, court has given reasons. So these reasons in support of the decision of the court on the question makes out a ratio, and that is what constitutes the binding force of the judgment in shortest way. Okay, but there are cases where as I said, reasons are not sufficiently given. There are cases when separate judgments are written and then the reasons are conflicting, and there are cases where sometimes statutory law is ignored, sometimes even earlier binding precedents are ignored. So task becomes rather difficult. Sometimes what happens, old judgment is cited and other party brings a new judgment saying that this is the latest judgment and therefore it has a binding force. Okay, but
Yes, sir.
the law is totally different. Actually, the precedent is compared to wine. As we say, wine improves with the age up to a certain point, and oldest the wine, better the value. Therefore, a precedent which remain unaltered for a long time, that means it has perfect legal principle. And the new precedent or the new judgment which is contrary to earlier judgment is actually per incuriam, because it has not referred to earlier binding precedent. Therefore, if anybody brings a latest judgment and says this is the latest, it should be followed, you must first see whether that latest judgment has referred to earlier judgment which is of old. Mede sir, madam, Suvarna madam.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
हॅलो, बोला, काही प्रश्न
Hello,
असले
sir.
तर सांगा, तुमचा व्ह्यू सांगा.
Nice.
There is one our learned friend Sagar Kasar.
Yes,
just
yes.
now referred the one term per curiam.
Per incurium, per incurium.
You also per curiam.
Yes,
You also use successfully before the charity commissioner.
yes, yes, yes.
I remember. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Just throw some light on that term and
Okay,
just
okay,
give us the explanation.
okay, okay. So, thank you. Actually, you made me remember that incident of charity
Yeah,
case.
yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I cited one judgment of Bombay High Court, wherein it was said that the delay in filing the change report is different than delay in filing first appeal, because there is a decree in favor of the judgment creditor in a civil suit, and judgment debtor has to file appeal if he is aggrieved and if he is willing to file appeal within period of limitation. And if the judgment debtor, that is the losing party, does not prefer an appeal within the limitation, then there is finality attached to the decree, and certain valuable rights are created in favor of that person, that is the judgment creditor. If after the limitation is over, the losing party comes to the court and says that now I am filing appeal, then the decree which is already finalized or which has got finality is to be again disturbed, or it is again subject to getting disturbed. So this causes a kind of prejudice to the judgment creditor. But the same is not the case in delay in filing the change report, because say for example election took place, earlier body has lost the election, new body has come into managing position, and the new body has not filed a change report within limitation as given in the Bombay Public Trust Act. So the Bombay High Court said that merely because new body has not filed a change report within limitation, it doesn't mean that the earlier body which has lost the election is entitled to say that we will continue because new body has not filed the change report in time. This is not a this is not the case. Therefore, in condoning delay in filing change report does not cause any prejudice to the earlier members who have already lost the election, and therefore the delay caused in filing the change report has to be condoned in every matter as a matter of course, as a matter of regular course. Now this judgment was cited by me as against this other party had brought the latest judgment of Bombay High Court and said that the provision of Bombay Public Trust Act is just like provision of Section 5 of the Limitation Act. Therefore, there has to be sufficient cause, and then each and every day's delay has to be explained. I simply saw that judgment and I did not find reference to the judgment which I had cited. I simply argued that this judgment cited by the other side is per incurium judgment because it is in the ignorance of the earlier binding judgment of the same court. And let me tell you, judgment of single bench given today binds tomorrow's single bench. Judgment of division bench given today binds tomorrow's division bench. So judgment cited by me was also by the single bench, and the judgment cited by other side was also by the single bench. In this case, when a single bench wants to take a different view than the earlier view, then the single bench itself cannot do. It has to refer the matter to the Chief Justice, and such matter has to be placed before the division bench. Therefore, this process was not followed, and the latest judgment takes an entirely different view. While doing so, it has not even distinguished the judgment which I cited. It has not even discussed. It has not even referred to earlier binding judgment. Therefore, the judgment cited by other side is simply per incurium because it was rendered in ignorance of the binding precedent of earlier bench. And the court was so happy with the argument that it accepted my judgment and condoned my delay. So this, when we can say the judgment is per incurium, there are few examples. For example, as I gave, today's bench decides some judgment, some case. While doing so, it ignores the earlier binding judgment, binding precedent. either of the same court or of the Supreme Court, or it has decided the case in ignorance of the statutory provisions itself, then such judgment also becomes per incurrium. Now, on this, I would like to give one example from Supreme Court with very interesting case. What has happened? A police reading party had gone to a place to nab a particular fellow because he was accused of some crime, and that fellow understood. Anyhow, he understood that police party is coming to nab me, arrest me, and then that fellow immediately flee away from that place. And the police party got angered. In that anger, that police party took the minor child of that accused fellow into their custody and gave a warning that unless that fellow surrenders to the court, they will not release the child. And this fellow subsequently came to know that police has done this nonsense. And then that fellow immediately approached the Supreme Court directly under Article 32, filing a petition of habeas corpus, in which initially court directed the concerned SSP, that is Senior Superintendent of Police and other officers, to investigate into the matter and to file a report as to whether the minor son of the petitioner was taken into custody by the concerned police party. Of course, it happens, usually it is the case, police will try to protect their own brother. They also did the same thing. They fabricated a report, false report, and they submitted, and they told the court that nothing like this happened. Then court anyhow got doubt, and court again ordered that a sitting district judge, okay. So then court anyhow had a doubt regarding the authenticity or the genuinity of the report filed by the police concerned officers. Then court ordered that the inquiry be conducted by the sitting district judge of the concerned place, and accordingly district judge was directed to look into the matter and file a report. Fortunately, the district judge, being an honest person, conducted inquiry fairly and submitted the report. Yes, this incident has taken place. The minor son of the petitioner was taken into custody by the concerned police party. Then Supreme Court on the spot itself convicted the senior police superintendent of police and other officers of not only the contempt of court act, but also he was for filing a false affidavit in the court to mislead the court. He was convicted along with others of the offense of perjury also. And perjury is an offense under section 191 dealt with 193 and 199 of IPC and some other sections of IPC also. Okay. Now this judgment you will find in the Google. If you type the Afzal versus State of Haryana, this judgment is reported by almost all top journals, SEC, AI, etc., etc. But I'll tell you how the judgment is per incurrium as far as the law is concerned, and I will tell the sequel of this case also. Now in CRPC we have a section 195 of CRPC read with 340 of CRPC, because the offense of perjury is having its own different procedure. As per section 195 of CRPC, a court cannot take cognizance of the offense of perjury unless the complaint is filed by the court in which the perjury is committed. That if the perjury was committed in the Supreme Court, then Supreme Court should have filed a complaint either by the judges themselves or by appointing some officer of the court in that behalf to file a complaint. That was not done. So the statutory provision of section 195 of CRPC read with 340 was ignored while deciding that case. Subsequently, one of the officers who was convicted of perjury and the contempt, realized this, and he underwent the punishment in Tihar. Then he realized this patent illegality in judgment of Supreme Court, and then he filed another petition in Supreme Court under Article 32, saying that the conviction with regard to perjury is illegal because it is contrary to 195 of CRPC. And Supreme Court accepted that, and this case law we will file again in Google or even in other top journals. M.S. Ahlawat versus State of Haryana. This is the sequel to earlier case of Afzal versus Haryana. Afzal was the petitioner whose son was taken. Now the MS Ahlawat is the officer who was convicted. Okay. So MS Ahlawat files a petition in Supreme Court, says that your lordship have ignored the provisions of section 195 and 340 of CRPC while convicting me, and this has resulted into deprivation of my liberty not according to procedure laid down in the law. And Supreme Court accepted. Supreme Court rectified the mistake, and they recalled the earlier order with regard to the perjury. So even the top courts also ignore the statutory provisions, and Supreme Court in the MS Ahlawat case accepted it. It rather made a comment that it was very unfortunate that while it proceeded to convict MS Ahlawat of perjury, it ignored the provisions of section 195, or the provisions of section 195 were not brought to the notice of the court. This is actually what the court admitted in the MS Ahlawat case. So there are cases where even statutory provisions also are ignored by the court, and then such judgment becomes per interim. That means they are not binding. Even the magistrate can refuse to follow. And there are so many judgments of such nature. Recently, I also had one judgment of Supreme Court which was cited by the state in the MAT, and Supreme Court said that even DCP or additional CP can also impose a penalty of dismissal or removal on constable. And they discussed the provisions of the Bombay Police Act. And it was cited. I immediately, without even discussing much, I told this judgment is per interim. Court was giving a smile, big smile. Court said, how? I said, my lord, Supreme Court has ignored the mandate of Article 311(2), because 311(2) says that no person shall be dismissed or removed from the service except by the authority who is appointing authority. Now, as far as constable in Maharashtra is concerned, the appointing authority is the commissioner, and the DCP and the additional CPs are held to be subordinate to the commissioner. Therefore, this judgment of Supreme Court is per interim because it has ignored the mandate of 311(2). Court accepted that. So these are so many times we come across these kind of things. Thank you, Kamreji, for making me remember incidents.
We come across so many terms, and especially this language, which is called, it's a legal language, legal principles also. But we don't know how to use it and how they actually mean
Yes,
it.
yes.
So while discussing such a things, it helps. It helps, as this wrestlers exercise in the talim. That is
Yes, yes.
a
Correct,
very
correct,
small
correct.
place, but they strengthen their muscles.
Yes, yes.
This is a good cause, good precedence we have started. Yeah, to discuss the things. So
Yes,
while
yes.
discussing, we enlighten first ourselves and then discuss. It's a good,
Yes,
and
yes.
it will help in the court of law to present the
Certainly.
things fearlessly.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. Okay, see you. I'll talk to you in the evening. Night.
Okay.
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 Bye.
Yes, yes.
Session was nice. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you very much, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Nice lecture, sir. Yes,
Dhanyawad. Thank you.
sir.
Can I close?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you all.